Hi again. You guys haven't done it for me, I guess.
Nice.
I'm really excited to be sharing this with you guys, so let's just get started. Before we can get into the nitty gritty, just want to do a quick little summary of the topics that we'll be covering today. Begin with a quick introduction of like the topic and the partner organization, bit of background info regarding the location specifically, called Sweetwater Lake, by the way. Some relevance to said Sweetwater Lake and the interconnectedness of that and the Latino community within Eagle County. Bit of methodology review, basically a literature review, as well as a bit of some of the site visits and what I gathered from those. We'll do a little bit of talking about the results and the key themes. We'll move on to the opportunities and next steps. We'll conclude with a nice little reflection. First, I want to start with the land acknowledgement. Northern Colorado is situated in the ancestral homelands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. Because of this, it is important that we, as both everyday people and academics, acknowledge and respect this fact. The plains of northern Colorado were sites of trade, hunting, and ritual for many. We recognize that the indigenous peoples are the original peoples of this land, and that the place that we have come to call home came at a cost. So, to introduce my partner organization, Eagle Valley Land Trust, they are a nonprofit based out of Eagle County, Colorado, whose goal is to preserve land against development for the enjoyment of the public. Their mission is to protect forever, as a permanent legacy, the lands that we love, including its scenic beauty, recreational opportunities, and wildlife habitats. They do this in a variety of ways, oftentimes helping members of the public with acquiring conservation easements on their lands, as well as by acquiring properties themselves and placing conservation easements on them. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, well, what lands do they cover? These lands. These lands. EVLT focuses on retaining permanent lands all throughout the western slope. This includes Garfield, Routt, and Grand counties as well. Many of the lands under EVLT's care are ranches or lands that were donated by families in order to be taken care of and to preserve the natural wilderness from any further development indefinitely. While this may seem like a lot to keep track of, Sweetwater Lake, which is where I'm focused, is the corner over here. So, if I may, I'd like to read a quote from EVLT's website. We partner with those who want to keep precious lands preserved, those who want their own lands protected, and those who want to find best forever solutions with an eye towards growth, community needs, and environmental stewardship. Ultimately, our work is about ensuring that more people have access and opportunity to enjoy the wonders of the beautiful Eagle Valley, while making sure we protect all that makes it so special. I included this quote because I just feel like it really encapsulates the essence of what EVLT stands for in a short blurb. Land protection for everybody to enjoy. And I kind of think that's pretty good. So with that in mind, there's two parts to this project: the context building and the actual deliverables. Before we can even begin to work on actual deliverables, we need to develop a bit more context on Sweetwater Lake and Eagle County. This is Eagle County. So as I've told you about EVLT, and they work throughout all the western slope, Eagle County is their home base, basically. And it's kind of just like, I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like so you understand what it looks like. And what we're really going to focus on is the demographics here. I have both of these visuals, and they are demographic information regarding the ethnicity of Eagle County's population, the far one on the left. And on the right, this one, we have the total ethnic makeup of the students within Eagle County School District. Now, I bring this up because I want to point out that like the second biggest ethnic group within Eagle County is predominantly Hispanic, Latino, and predominantly Hispanic, Latino, making up about a third of the total population within Eagle County. And that total population is 55,000, so about a third of that, 18,000 people. So with that in mind, this is the total population of the one on the right. all the students within Eagle County School District, notice that the majority of the population is also Latino. And so I bring that up because from a statistical standpoint, Latinos make up a significant amount of the total population of Eagle County. Despite it being a smaller county population size wise, they make up a majority, a third in total. And so looking at these numbers, it would make sense from an outreach perspective to try and appeal to the second largest demographic in the county and the fastest growing demographic at that. Nonprofit work survives almost entirely, well, mostly survives entirely from outside income like grants and donations. But it's also important that their relevance does not dwindle in the public sphere. Losing relevancy can impact ability to attract new donors, complete their long-term goals, and threaten their overall long-term sustainability. In short, Latinos in Eagle County are a large and steadily increasing demographic that nonprofits rely on. And since nonprofits rely on their reputation and outside funding, it would benefit them to perform more public and intentional outreach towards them. With that in mind, let's move on to the next topic. We have Ute history. The Ute people are the original inhabitants of much of what we consider to be the Rockies. Their territory went as west as Utah and as south as Colorado. Smack dab in the middle of their homelands is Eagle County and Sweetwater Lake. According to the creation myth, the Utes were, well, let me just tell you the whole story because it's a really good story. Sorry, big tangent. So before there was anything, according to the Ute creation myth, there was Sinawov and Coyote, brothers. And Sinawov had a magic sack in which he collected a bunch of sticks and he put them in that sack. He told his brother Coyote, hey, I want you to take this sack and empty out the contents in the Sacred Valley over that way, whichever way that was. And Coyote's like, okay, I can do that. And Coyote takes a sack and he heads over towards the Sacred Valley, but he gets curious. He wants to know what's in the bag. He doesn't know why he can't look in. And before he can make it to the valley, he says to himself, a peek won't hurt. The moment he opens the bag, all the peoples of the world, they flood out of the bag, all yelling, hooting, hollering, just scaring everybody, and they run away in all sorts of directions. The Coyote freaks out. He turns to his brother, Sinawov. Sinawov says to him, why couldn't you just wait until you got to the valley? Because of that, I'm going to curse you to walk on four legs and live only at night. But when Sinawov looks in the bag, there is only a few people left in that bag. And Sinawov says, because these people were left in the bag, everyone else is going to be their enemy and fight them. And there's so few of them, but they will be strong in number. Strong. There'll be few, but they will be strong. Those people would end up becoming the Ute people of Colorado. So I bring this up because even in the creation myth, they do not, many other native groups have migration stories. They came from one place, they moved to another, and this is where that other place is their new homeland, but not the Utes. According to them, they had always been in these areas. These are their homes, their ancestral homes. They've never been anywhere else. And so it's because of that that they have developed, not them specifically, but I like to think that it really emphasizes the connection that they have with this space. It's important to them, not because, well, because it's their homeland, but it goes beyond that. There is an intimate connection with this space that just kind of has no words to explain it. And so prior to the introduction, I'm going to move on a little bit. Prior to the introduction of horses, the Ute were nomadic people. They traveled through their territories, oftentimes moving with the seasons. In the summer, they'd hunt in the mountains. In the winter, they'd return down to the valley for more protection from the cold. Like all peoples, they began to develop their relationships with their environment. Cultural norms, practices began to grow as a result of that relationship with the land. And alongside that relationship, their practical knowledge of their environment became interwoven with their identity. Today, we call this specific type of knowledge traditional ecological knowledge, or tech. And as the original stewards of these lands, it was important to me that we take some of this information that they have been cataloging and bring it to the Latino community in a way that was more than just regurgitating information. Now, Sweetwater Lake. I've talked about Eagle County demographics and Ute history in regards to Eagle County specifically, and all that remains is Sweetwater Lake. That is the place, that is the focus of my work. It's a lake with a colorful past and a promising future. And one thing I really want to focus on is actually the connection that it has with the Ute culture prior and now, and as well as more modern history. Sweetwater Lake is a 72-acre lake situated on about 488-acre property found on the border of Eagle and Garfield counties of Colorado. Through the years, the property on which Sweetwater Lake is situated has passed hands from owner to owner. Some prior owners have intended to develop it into all sorts of industries. Someone wanted to do a dude ranch. There wanted to be a hotel. Some people want to put a bottling factory in Sweetwater Lake to like take the water from it. But it wasn't until 2019 when the property was put up for sale again that the local Sweetwater community, in partnership with EVLT and the Conservation Fund, started the Save the Lake campaign. And through this effort, enough funds were raised that the purchase was made for the property, and then it was eventually transferred to White River National Forest. That way, there's no means for anyone to be able to purchase it or develop it again. EVLT still has a strong connection with Sweetwater Lake. They frequently, with a partnership with another group, Exploremos, host guided walks around the lake and horseback rides with one of the outfitters that's on the property. And the reason that I bring this up is because the lake and the property, despite having switched hands several times, there was some intention, with the intention of it disrupting the lake's naturalness. Sorry. It wasn't until recently that, despite this, it wasn't until recently that the general ecosystem of Sweetwater Lake has been secured. But before any of that, before Colorado was even an idea, the place that we know as Sweetwater Lake had already been there. In fact, it had been a stop along the trails heading up to the flat tops that was used by the Native Americans several times. We know this because not only is there many catalog Ute trails coming through Sweetwater Lake and the property itself, but there's actually a cave with pictographs that were created by the ancient Utes a time long before us. So all this to say, to emphasize the importance that this land has always held, first to the Ute people, and well, still to the Ute people, because they're not really gone. And even now, as we saw how the local community decided to come together with local nonprofits and even counties in order to protect the space that they enjoyed. To the next slide. So what? So what? What's the big deal? What's the connection here? What are we trying to do with connecting Latinos in Eagle County, the Ute culture and history, and the Eagle County demographics as a whole? That's a good question. That's what I was wondering too. So a little bit of project background. When I first made contact with Bergen and Carey, shout out to Bergen and Carey if they're watching, by the way. I first found myself really unsure about what I wanted and if that was the same thing EVLT wanted. I knew that I wanted to do something that would see active use, hopefully. I wanted to create something that was relevant to my cultural identity as a first-generation American / child of immigrants. And so it felt, and I wanted to do something that specifically appealed to a community that was not who most conservation organizations appeal to, that being college-educated baby boomers or people with wealth, right? So it felt like the stars were aligning because after some back and forth with EVLT, it was kind of made clear to me that we were on a similar wavelength as to what we were looking to do research into. Specifically, when we want to look into addressing barriers to access for Sweetwater Lake, as well as understanding the complex relationship between indigenous communities and Sweetwater Lake. Couple this vibe that we got with the fact that EVLT has a collaborative with another nonprofit called Exploremos. This nonprofit, by the way, explicitly works to get Latino people into outdoor recreation at no cost. It really got me brainstorming. And together we came up with 3 deliverables. A guided hike around Sweetwater Lake that taught participants about the lake's history, both Ute and current, a handout written entirely in Spanish that provides visual examples of local native plants and some ethnobotanical uses, and finally, an interpretive garden plant list that'll further continue the education of Ute history and culture. So with this idea in motion, I began to do a literature review, looking for articles and resources that had specific emphasis on conservation science and teaching these topics to traditionally underrepresented peoples. Just follow me. Thank you. So here's a list of some of the research that had helped to really mold my ideas for the lesson plan and deliverables. To clarify, me and EVLT decided on a hybrid situation where I'd come down every so often to do a little bit of sightseeing, or I guess research sightseeing rather, and just to kind of get an idea for what is this place that I'm visiting or even writing about looks like. So I would make a few trips down from Fort Collins down to Eagle, 3 days apiece. I got to meet Bergen and Carrie in person, and it felt like kind of like meeting a celebrity a little bit, just because like you email them for so long and like you don't really meet them, and then you meet them. Oh, you're a real person. Cool. So while in Eagle County, I visited Sweetwater Lake, and that photo doesn't do it justice. It's breathtaking in person. It's kind of like an oasis in the desert. You need to travel down to like this narrow dirt road that winds and is bumpy as all hell, and it's just 20 miles of nothingness except for like properties on each side, and it just opens up. It's just there. And so it kind of makes sense why people are just so adamant about protecting the place. It's beautiful. So while there, I got to participate in a guided hike led by Exploremos. This was great for seeing in what ways I could build upon and adapt their guided hikes to better suit the needs of the lesson plan that EVLT would try to implement themselves. The visits also gave me time to actually look for native plants that would potentially use for the handouts and for programming if possible. These bullet points function as a sort of guideline for how I would structure the lesson plan. The first one, do not take without asking, is incredibly important. Around the world, so many institutes have finally begun to acknowledge traditional ecological knowledge as a valid form of knowledge. And for as long as there have been Western scientific inquiry, I'm going to say tech has been simultaneously discredited and extracted from for personal benefit. In order to avoid that, when referring to youth-specific history and knowledge, I use readily available resources that were publicly available and had already had consent for use. Which sounds obvious, but it's important to understand that there's a history of taking without ever asking. If you can't do the legwork to reach out and get express permission, make sure that you at least aren't taking more than what's been provided. Next, we meet people where they are, physically and culturally. If you want to perform outreach to a certain community, you can't expect them to come find you. You go find them. Simple but true. However, it goes beyond that. If you want genuine responses to data, you need a baseline idea of what it is you are trying to find out more information about. Referring back to extractive practices, it will damage your ability to build connections and retain them if you do not tailor your practices to their cultural needs of the people you are trying to connect to. This can show itself in many ways. The best thing that you could do is just be genuinely interested. If you're invited to participate in a cultural practice, do it. Someone doesn't know English, get a translator, or better yet, communicate in their own language if you can. Your work does not stop the moment you get what you want. This particular takeaway was incredibly important to me. So when designing the handouts that be used in the guided hikes, we intentionally wrote them in Spanish, using layman's terms and avoiding jargon so that anyone could theoretically pick up a handout and learn something new. Oopsies. I skipped. Oops, that was. Hold on. Hold on. Okay. Well, I'll just tell you the other one. Now I got it. Okay. The third bullet point, tell a story. Make the content that you are trying to relate to other people relatable and enjoyable. For a lot of us, learning for learning's sake is what drives us, but that's not always the case for everybody else. You need to make it something that can have an impact on their everyday life. And because of that, I made sure to use certain, what's the word I'm looking for? Relatable like examples of ethnobotany or even like just traditional knowledge that could be passed on that was relatable to both the Latino people and, well, yeah, the Latino people, because that's what we're talking about. So, going on. this is the first deliverable that I worked out. This is the handout that would be given to our participants during the guided walks in order to just have an example of native plants in Sweetwater Lake, as well as how possibly it would have been used from an ethnobotanical perspective. So I really like this one specifically because it's all in Spanish, right? Which is intentional because again, the people that are participating in this are Latino people, probably their predominant language or their primary language is Spanish, written and otherwise. So I put the best I could translations for, say, this is a serviceberry, right? So I put scientific, followed by the Spanish, followed by the English, and I put the different Ute dialects for serviceberry there. That's what says all the stuff like Tuwap or Tuwump, that's Southern Ute version of saying serviceberry, and Suwump is this Ute Indian tribe version of saying serviceberry, in order to like kind of instill the idea of this knowledge being present prior to them, if you will. Visuals again for identification practices, and a couple more details regarding how many petals a flower has, or what color they're supposed to be, the shape of the leaves, et cetera, et cetera. And then I also put more ethnobotanical uses for the Ute specifically had for these fruits and plants. For example, serviceberries were often used for making pemmican, which is like the original energy bar pretty much. It's just lard, berries, just coagulated into one that would just keep you going. And so that's kind of like, this is one of those examples of trying to make it more relatable to the audience that you're trying to work with. A lot of these ethnobotanical uses, they may sound familiar to someone that maybe, like my parents, they would use more home remedies rather than like traditional like pill or something. An example that I have would be that my parents taught me, my mom specifically told me that if you have an earache, that you like put a garlic clove in your ear with a cotton swab and just let it sit there, and it's supposed to help the earache, right? Or another one would be if you were to cut a potato, you're sick, right? Say you're just like flu or whatever. You're sick, you'd cut a potato or an onion, and then you put the cut part on the ball of your foot, like on the palm of your foot, let it sit overnight in order to suck out all of the, I guess, sickness, if you will. And while I may not understand totally the science behind it, I understand that like these are ideas and lessons that have been passed on for a long time at this point, probably like hundreds of years, maybe. And so it would be unfair to invalidate these claims of like remedies just because they are not how you would say like the standard Western approach. And so that's just an example of one of the deliverables. The thing is, the other two deliverables were written documents, and I didn't think of it how I could present that. But Alex showed me a good way. He just took a screenshot of his document and put it out there. I should have done that. That's a good idea. But then the second deliverable was actually the lesson plan. In that lesson plan, some of the themes that I came upon was interdisciplinary approaches to education, informal education, cultural relevance, and stewardship as a responsibility. Those were just some of the topics that the lesson plan was supposed to present, right? And then the content was actually Sweetwater Lake history, Ute historical presence, and ethnobotanical knowledge, intersectionality of Latino and Native values. In short, the lesson plan would just kind of cover most of what I already talked about regarding the Ute history, Sweetwater history, how that interconnects, and why it's relevant to people now. And the idea was that like from these lesson plan, we would be able to not only like give ethnobotanical knowledge, knowledge in a respectful way to the new community that is the Latino community of Eagle Valley, but we also can make it again a relatable topic. And ultimately that's what helps build the connections between people and land. And while the Latino people may not be the original stewards of Eagle Valley, that doesn't mean that like that history or that knowledge should be lost as a result. That's a photo I took on another Sweetwater trip with Lynn Albers, local botanist. She knows a lot. It's really cool. And the final deliverable was the interpretive garden plant list, which was be used specifically for EVLT's interpretive garden at their new base in Edwards, Colorado. The content of that was just 10 plants, their ute names, descriptions, ethnobotanical uses, and how to care for them. The beauty of this was EVLT wanted a space of their own that they can continue this education outside of Sweetwater Lake. They intentionally made space for on their property to like put these plots for gardenings, and they wanted to use ute native plants. So that's what we were looking for. And so the hope is that like with these plants, we're going to put up signage that would be relevant to more ecological aspects of, or like ethnobotanical aspects of ute knowledge, and then further this education beyond just the one experience that you had going up a hill or whatever. And these were a few candidates that were possible for the plant list, but didn't make the cut. Field bindweed and a wild rose with, it seemed like a little friend on there. Yeah. Mhm. So then after building up these deliverables, some possible next steps that I figured EVLT and I could take would be to pilot the lesson plans, collect feedback from participants, complete lesson, and I have to complete the lesson plan in both languages. It was originally supposed to be in Spanish, so as to, well, talk to a predominantly Spanish speaking audience, and then interpret it, do more development on the interpretive garden signage. It would be important for outreach to do all of these things. Obviously, the lesson plans haven't been tested. The original plan was to test them by tune, but that didn't work. Plans change. And so now that there's a complete lesson plan, or almost complete lesson plan rather, I think it would be important that we move on to just trial and erroring it and just getting feedback from participants as time goes on. Again, interpreted, like the lesson plan itself is not complete, but it's getting there. Just gotta translate it. And then if the plant list is correct and good, interpretive signage would be next. And that would involve just, again, ute knowledge, putting it on somewhere that's easily accessible. And well, I can do that if they need me to do it at EVLT, but that's whatever. So recommendations would be to continue to engage in outreach, reach out to other organizations, reach out to tribal liaisons for further development of say lesson, like what's another word for lesson plan? Basically just tribal more lessons, if you will. And then continue to foster a safe space for all people to enjoy, especially now, because things have been difficult. Just for most everybody. So if they I make these recommendations because ultimately EVLT, what they want to connect with Latino audiences. That's their goal, and it makes sense too, but they also want to explain the history of the place that they're on to people that may or may not know otherwise. And so if they want to keep this up, they have to continue to participate in outreach. Like when I was there one time, there was a rodeo was in town. And so they had a booth out there where they would just talk to people and just get their opinions on things and make sure that like they knew who they were and that they were an active member of the community. Stuff like that, showing their face. Say do a presentation at school, for example. Reaching out to other organizations. There's plenty of outdoor focused organizations in Eagle Valley. It's a big tourist town. A lot of people love to do hiking and skiing specifically. So there's a lot of different organizations that focus on conserving, the environment in the wilderness. If you can build these coalitions and really foster like the importance that foster this need to like protect and really engage with the people there, it can only do good, Reach out to tribal liaisons for further development. Again, I'm just one guy. I was working with information that was readily available, but it's possible that, you can get more if you go directly to the source and you create and curate that relationship. And finally, continue to foster a safe space for all people to enjoy. It's a no-brainer. Just do right by your community and they'll do right by you. So reflections, experience, and personal growth. looking at this experience now that it's over, I find myself really thinking about what skills do I have and what skills did I think I have before starting this capstone. I began this work thinking all I need to do was to stay consistent with my pace and all will fall into place. It's easier said than done. And a result was there was lulls in productivity, but the experience of being in this position forces you to do your work. Which, you know, it's hard sometimes. We're all like human. Despite the lulls in productivity, despite the fact that, you know, I'm tired and I want to sleep, you know, or my imposter syndrome, the work has to be done. You can't ignore it. It's not going to go away. And so I think, to the best of my abilities, like taking all of this, like just what's the word, like weight and like stuff that you got to worry about, and like kind of being resilient through it, it really pushes you to ask yourself, how capable are you? What is your limit? And do you think you can do more? And then when it came to like this experience just pushing me out of my comfort zone, it really did a lot. But I'm grateful for it. You're forced to hold yourself accountable for your own sake, and it obligates you to do things you're not comfortable with. I hate driving, and I've never been west of Denver, so I still drove 3 hours to Eagle County, into the mountains to like visit the sites. And so, and I found the time when I felt like I didn't have the time to do some work just wherever I could. You are forced to be adaptable to the situation at hand. And so, I mean, despite how difficult this might have been and how much, if I had more time, I feel like we could have done more. I mean, it was still a good experience just to like understand what I'm capable of. And I'm kind of wondering, just I want to see how my future career aspects or just career in general will be impacted by these skills. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to Bergen and Carrie, CLTL cohort gang, and faculty. Thank you specifically, Caitlin, because you helped me out a lot yesterday, and my mom and dad. So, you guys for that. And sources for some of the photos that I used. Yeah.